ribbons or trophies or anything, so. So you all have one in front of you, and after we finish, you'll sign it and date it, and then I have a notary that will be notarizing them for us afterwards. So we'll start, if everybody's ready, I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Minnesota.
And the Constitution of the State of Minnesota.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of
Commission Chair.
Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission Chair.
And then to the best of my judgment and ability, so help me God.
To the best of my judgment
and ability, so help me God.
Okay, great. And then you can sign at the bottom, and I will collect them and give them to our notary that was nice enough to jump in for us today.
What it doesn't say is that you can be impeached.
Really?
It's a bad joke. Laugh.
Amusingly, it's actually easier to remove me than any of the rest of them.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's kind of nice to be removed. I mean, I'm just saying.
Hey.
Sandy was the mayor of South St. Paul for how many
St. Paul
years?
Park.
I mean, St. Paul Park.
Yeah. I was on for 18 years, and I just retired in January, and it's so nice to go back to just one full-time job. My blood pressure's gone down. I'm just, I don't have to give a rip anymore, except I care about all of that.
I hear similar things from people that are former members of the legislature.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I have way less stress in my life now. All right.
Thank you.
So that part's done. We'll call ourselves to order for the day. Apologies for being a bit late. Someday the streets will all be intact. First up is the approval of our agenda for the day, which we can do just by consensus. Are there any changes necessary to our agenda? Hearing none, we can call that approved as presented. Then we'll take a motion for approval of our April 4th meeting minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Bob, do we have a second?
Second.
Second from David, thank you. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of approving those as presented, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, those are approved as presented. Thank you. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting for any interested persons to address the commission on matters not on our agenda for the day. Do we have anyone registered?
We have no one.
We do not this one. Okay. If you would like to do that in the future, there's an email address listed on our agenda online, and you can email staff to let us know. That brings us to our first business item, which is the Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail, a Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant award for Carver County. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Jessica Lee. I'm a planner at the Council. And I'm here to present business item 2024-112, the Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund award, the HICRA property for Carver County. Oh, I don't have the.
Oh, sorry.
And HICRA stands for Hennepin County Railroad, Regional Railroad Authority. Thank you. So the Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail starts in the northeastern part of Carver County next to Carver Park Reserve in Victoria and travels about 3.5 miles before crossing into Hennepin County and traveling an additional 12.5 miles to meet the Minnesota River Bluffs Regional Trail in downtown Hopkins. The map on the left shows the entirety of the Lake Minnetonka Regional Trail. The southwest corner, shaded in yellow, is the Carver County portion of the trail. The remainder of the trail is located in Hennepin County. The map on the right shows the Carver County segment of the trail in the city of Victoria. The subject property is the 3.5 miles of trail corridor that runs the length of the Victoria segment. This property is currently owned by the Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority, or HICRA, and managed by Three Rivers Park District. HICRA wishes to divest its ownership of the property, and once acquired, Carver County will own and operate the Carver County portion of the trail. These images provide an aerial view of the HICRA parcels. The existing trail corridor is about 100 feet wide and mostly wooded, except when it travels through downtown Victoria, where it's also wider. So the trail corridor was appraised at 10 million, but Hicra has agreed to sell it to Carver County for $1. The $10 million value of the corridor will be used to meet the county's match requirement. So the majority of the project costs are for immediate repair needs in order to provide a safe and usable trail. These needs include repair or replacement of 7 culverts, 10 ADA ramps, and a retaining wall. These costs are reflected in the site remediation and land stewardship costs of $373,792. So the total project cost and grant amount is $395,957. And so our rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, the Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail Long Range Plan, and Carver County is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund Park Acquisition Opportunity Funds. So our recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $395,957 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Carver County to acquire approximately 40 acres of a former Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority Trail corridor located in Victoria, Minnesota for the Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. And with that, happy to take questions, and also Marty is here from Carver County to help us out.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions? Yes, Bob?
Mr. Chair and Jessica, I got a question about, it talks about an in-kind contribution of $9,999,000. But what land is that Carver County is swapping for this trail?
It's not. That is a reference to some language in our Parks Policy Land that essentially credits the implementing agency for securing a donation for less than the appraised value. So it's not that we're swapping land, it's that we're saying the value of the donation above the purchase price counts towards their local match obligation
Okay,
in terms of our 25% thing.
thank you.
Anyone else? I figured that was gonna come up. If no other questions, we can also take motions.
I move approval.
Okay, we have a motion for the recommendations from the staff report from Bob. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
I think David beat you.
David?
Either way,
That motion is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $395,957 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Carver County to acquire approximately 40 acres of a former Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority trail corridor located in Victoria for the Lake Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. Do we have any discussion on that? Yes, and since our cost essentially is all for the stewardship, do you want to give us a little more detail on what the stewardship costs actually are in this case?
Sure, I would ask Marty to come up and help with that.
Just as a matter of interest.
Mr. Chair, members, Marty Walsh, Carver County Parks and Recreation Director. And so the stewardship costs are pretty much as Jessica has outlined. They are repairs or replacement of existing infrastructure, largely culverts. And so when we're getting the corridor at I'll say a bargain or basement discount price, it comes with some immediate obligations for us to maintain the corridor in a safe and usable condition. And some of the culverts that Jessica has mentioned are at a point where they've deteriorated and need to be repaired. And so that's largely the cost.
Okay. So I know in a previous one, similarly, there was some like pollution stuff that had to be handled as well because of railroad use. It sounds like that's not present on this one.
Mr. Chair and members, we did do a phase one analysis of the corridor. A fairly extensive report was provided. If you'd like all, 700 pages of that report, you'll have to do it.
No.
But railroad corridors, as you know, come with a fair amount of baggage. And then with regards to Allsay, we did not find any contamination on our portion of the corridor, but there are sites that are adjacent to the property that did come back as either past sites that have been cleaned up or in fact do still have some contamination.
Okay. Any other discussion? I'm making this very interesting today. All right. Well, hearing no more, all in favor of that motion as presented, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, that is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can ride your bike all the way from the city of Minneapolis to the city of Victoria, all on trail. And it's an amazing trail.
What is that total distance, do you know?
It's 32 miles. I
Okay.
just made that up. Sorry, I don't know. Anthony, what is it? I'm sure you've done it. 30-something.
You're probably pretty close. Okay, well, that brings us on then to our big information item for the day. We have a draft of the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails policy plan. Go ahead, multiple staff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Council Member, and Commissioners. I'm Colin Kelly, and I'm here with Tracy Kinney and Kevin Fan. And the three of us are going to present about the first 3/4 of this presentation. And then we're going to get out of these seats, and Amanda Lovely and Jessica Lee are going to take these seats for us and finish out the presentation as we move into the later section. So let's get this rolling. Here's a high-level overview of what we intend to cover over the next maybe 20 to 25 minutes or so. First, we'd like to share some of the advice we heard from you and from the Community Development Committee at the beginning of last month. We'd also like to share a pair of timelines that will help focus in on what we intend to do with you all over the next 4 months or so, and then the schedule for finalizing the Regional Development Guide over the remainder of this year and into early next year. The main part of the presentation tonight is to provide you with an overview of the 60% draft of the Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, which of course will be a chapter in the Regional Development Guide, Imagine 2050. Of course, we've got a lot to cover in the 8 primary sections that make up the 60% draft plan, but our main objective tonight is to hear from you. And so we're going to be pausing at a few key moments in the presentation today after we provide that 60% plan overview, which is essentially the first 6 sections of the plan. Then we'll hear from Amanda on the topic of recreation facilities and programming. We'll pause there again. And then we'll hear from Jessica about finance, and we'll pause there once again. We're taking a little bit of a deeper dive into those 2 topics you see in the 3rd and 4th positions on this slide here. So for each of the policy focus sections, that is our sections 2 through 8, we'll provide you with the latest policy and action language, as well as the key changes to that section. And again, there's a lot to cover, so what we're going to try to do is focus your attention on some of the main or key changes in each of those sections. So let's get to it. First, that advice I was telling you about. We thank you so much for your continued advice on this topic. And last month, we heard a lot of advice from you. First, a recommendation to outline which items, are updated in the 4-year versus the 10-year cycle of our policy plan updates. That we define terms and phrases like natural systems and areas that are not well served. And that we define which tasks are the council responsibility and which tasks are the regional park implementing agency's responsibility. We also heard you say loud and clear that there is a need for building more awareness of the regional parks and trail system. And from a financial perspective, you underscored the importance of the equity grant program and the need for continued support of the program, as well as a need to emphasize the council's fiduciary responsibilities. And then we step a few days back in time to April 1st, Community Development Committee. We shared a very similar information item to that council committee as well. And we heard a lot of good advice as well, just like we did from you all. First, when prioritizing acquisition, that restoration efforts should be balanced across the region. This elevates the importance of geographic balance in how we acquire and restore lands in the regional parks and trail system. We also heard, like we heard from you, that it's important to define what areas not well served means for locating new regional parks or trails. With regard to climate, council members supported the idea of telling a better story about the regional parks and trail system and how it can and does have a real positive impact on climate resilience and water quality. On the topic of the Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, there was some concern expressed about the potential lack of oversight from commissioners and council members. Finally, with regard to finance, council members encourage financial accountability when working with both legacy and environmental and natural resources trust fund dollars. We'll be talking about almost all of these topics in the slides to come, but first we want to quickly share how we'll get to the next major planning process milestone, the draft public comment or 90% plan. So this is the first of the two timelines I've referenced. This is today and the next 3 months of activities with you all, the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission. Today's focus, of course, is on providing that overview of the draft 60% plan. We also intend to dive a little bit deeper into those two sections of the policy plan, recreation facilities and programming, and finance. Next month, we intend to do a little bit of a deeper dive into natural systems and climate resilience or resiliency. And of course, into that topic we've shared with you on the last couple of occasions, the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. In July, we're going to focus on the system plan, the planning chapter or section, and system protection. And then come August 1st, we're going to bring you the next iteration, the draft public comment or 90% plan, along with the discussion of what's currently called Chapter 9, our work plan for the next 4 years. Again, today's focus is meant to be on recreation, facilities and programming, and finance. So this is sort of the second half of the summer or the second half of the year leading into next year. This is the schedule for finalizing the Regional Development Guide. Come August, what you see before you, the draft Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, that's integrated into the Regional Development Guide. On August 14th, the Council authorizes the release of the draft Regional Development Guide for public comment, and a draft is posted online the next day. As a side note, the MC you see on the slide here relates to or defines the Metropolitan Council as a body. You probably see the CDC a little further down there. That's the Community Development Committee. On September 25th, a public hearing on the Regional Development Guide will commence. And again, that will be at the council meeting. On October 7th, the public comment period and public hearing closes at the Community Development Committee meeting. And then after that, the public comment reports are prepared, and in early 2025, the Regional Development Guide is adopted. So at this point, we're going to be moving into the actual plan, the draft plan or 60% plan, we've been calling it. So I'm going to be covering the next 3 slides, and then I'm going to pass it off to Tracy. First, a little background about this section. The introduction to the Regional Parks and Trails chapter of the Regional Development Guide is proposed to include fundamental and foundational information about the regional parks and trail system, the partnership with the 10 regional park implementing agencies, research and engagement summaries, and a whole lot more. But one of the foundational pieces that is proposed for inclusion is the draft vision, mission, and values that have been developed in collaboration with you all and the regional park implementing agencies. So we'll start there. So I know a number of folks around the table were in place for the development of these draft statements, but this may be new to some of you as well. So we wanted to share this again today to both remind you or to share with you our draft vision, mission, and values. The vision, together, growing community connections and inspiring health and healing through exceptional outdoor experiences in high-quality natural areas. The mission, a partnership committed to an interconnected, nature-based parks and trail system where everyone belongs. And the values, at least at the sort of top line here, collaboration, belonging, stewardship, well-being, adaptability, and education. Our values reflect the core beliefs that guide how we work toward our vision of what we want to achieve. And of course, I believe you've seen this one before. These are our draft parks and trails objectives. These are also foundational to our work going forward. And again, because you've seen this before, I'll just kind of share the top lines here. And of course, you can read them a little bit more fully if you so choose. But foster equity and belonging, take care of what we have, protect and restore, adapt and mitigate, and meet future needs. These objectives connect the 5 cross-cutting regional goals to the Parks and Trails policies and actions we'll be discussing in the remainder of the presentation. This is something relatively new. We've shared with you a little bit about existing conditions, but we wanted to share this with you once again in the context of the introduction to the Parks and Trails chapter. These statements provide critical context to the spaces that the Council helps plan for and fund, and that our implementing agency partners own and operate. Importantly, these statements consider how the region and the regional park system came to be. They highlight the critical importance of parks, trails, and the outdoors to people and communities. It makes clear the connection to climate and that we have a role in helping to care for the environment, and it acknowledges that funding continues to be a challenge. Put another way, again, focusing on the top lines, there is a history of inequitable development. Regional parks and trails are vital to people and communities. Climate is changing, and the system faces growing pains. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to Tracy to move us into the next section.
Thanks, Colin. I'm going to be talking about Section 2. Section 2 covers the system plan. The system plan includes the maps and lists of the regional parks and trails that comprise the system, including units that are open to the public, planned, and search areas and corridors. The system plan also includes the classification descriptions of the types of regional parks and trails, including regional parks, park reserves, regional trails, and special recreation features. So here are the policies and actions. Council staff proposed these new policies and actions for the system plan section of the Regional Parks and Trails policy chapter. The policy covers maintaining the system through data, maps, plans, processes, and applications in support of the Regional Parks and Trails planning. The 3 actions touch on maintaining the plan, including reviewing and updating the system plan and park and trail classifications, identifying and conducting research, and annually updating the map data set. These are things that we are already doing, and we're just putting it into the plan to have some more structure here. So here are some of the major proposed changes. You've seen these before. So the major changes to the system plan section include the new policies and actions that we just reviewed, moving some of the content to the Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, and lastly, the addition of 2 regional park and trail classifications. The 2 classifications include the cultural landscape classification and the natural area open space classification. We heard from you about the cultural landscape classification a couple of times. We look forward to hearing more about that tonight. We heard that it needs to be a broader classification than just focused on one culture. And then also a robust definition is needed. So we're going to be considering this as we move forward, and we look forward to developing it and hearing more from you tonight about it. So Kevin is going to take it from here and talk about natural systems.
Thank you, Tracy. So the next section hosts our natural systems policy and associated actions, and this mostly focuses a lot on locating lands throughout the region that are seen as having high potential for restoration work or being acquired as a part of the regional parks and trail system. And moving on into our policy and actions, the natural systems policy reads as identify, protect, restore, and maintain lands with high quality natural features, access to water, and or restoration potential as part of the regional parks and trail system. We have 4 associated actions that focus on the themes of locating and acquiring different lands throughout the region for our regional parks and trail system and trying to prioritize that throughout the region. We also have an action that is focused on ensuring geographic balance, but also an equity component to ensure that we are adequately serving the communities in our region and to ensure spatial distribution of our regional park and trail lands. We also have an action that focuses on natural systems research, and then another that focuses on maintaining the natural systems within our current regional parks and trails. Some of the key changes that are being proposed within this specific section is the reframing of the natural systems section. So to provide some context, this is actually in the existing regional parks policy plan. This is our siting and acquisition policy and strategies, and we've ultimately reframed it as the first action under locating and siting priorities. So we framed it under the natural systems policy just to try and realign different items. And the other key change that is being proposed is the addition of an equity component in the geographic balance action, just to kind of add it as a consideration when identifying lands throughout the region. The next section is climate resiliency, which focuses a lot on climate action and how we can carry out this work throughout the regional parks and trail system. This section is entirely new with a policy and 6 associated actions. The policy reads as adapt and enhance the regional parks and trail system to promote resilience to climate change, including the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. So this section focuses a lot on how we can mitigate our emissions and sequester additional carbon while also understanding how the regional parks and trails can adapt to the present impacts of climate change. A lot of these actions focus on the themes of committing to council research around climate and taking inventory of greenhouse gas emissions, but also understanding how much sequestration capabilities we have as a regional parks and trail system. Other key actions talk about the coordination of climate action with our regional park implementing agencies, whether it's helping support the implementation of climate action plans or working on developing strategies to improve public awareness of the regional parks and trails and climate change and just telling a better story overall. Some of the proposed changes, as I had mentioned previously, was the addition of this policy and the 6 actions. Other ones are the commitment to council research on climate change, specifically within the regional parks and trails. And then the other item is to focus on supporting our regional park implementing agencies in spreading awareness and trying to educate and involve the communities throughout to get involved in climate action. Now I will hand this over to Colin to go through our planning section.
Thanks, Kevin. Like Kevin mentioned, Section 5 is planning. Unlike the past 3 sections, this one isn't changing a whole lot, at least in its content. As we mentioned previously, some of the content is proposed to be moved over to the Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook. We'll tell you a little bit more about that now and, of course, next month. But first, we'll start with the planning policies and actions. The planning section includes the single policy and the 3 actions you see here. The policy promote long-range planning and help provide integrated resource planning across jurisdictions. And the 3 actions you see before you, again, focusing on the top line, long-range plan requirements, enhance multimodal access, and cost sharing. Fill this up. Of course, you're probably most familiar with the first action, previously called strategy, focused on our plan requirements. Every time we bring a long-range plan before you from one of the various implementing agencies, we go through all of the requirements for each of those plans to give you a comprehensive view of what's required and what's shared in that space. So that one you're probably fairly familiar with. Some of the proposed changes here, again, this planning policy is largely unchanged, but a couple of the proposed moves are worth noting. First, moving the long-range plan requirements themselves and the details of the plan amendment process to the planning handbook. That includes the recently council-approved administrative process for minor long-range plan amendments. Second, moving the existing joint powers agreement strategy to the planning handbook as well. And again, I mentioned this before, back on slide 4, we'll be delving into more details on the Parks and Trails Planning Handbook at the June MPOS meeting next month. And we'll be doing the same with the planning policy at the July MPOS meeting, where we'll have a special focus on this section. So at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Tracy to talk about section 6.
Thanks, Colin. Section 6. So section 6 covers system protection. System protection discusses how the council protects the regional parks and trails system through comprehensive planning, land conversions, and utilities. So the system protection section is not really changing too much. The policy before you and the actions, they're not really changing. So the policy states protect public investment in acquisition and development by assuring that every component in the system is able to fully carry out its designated role as long as a need for it can be demonstrated. And then the actions are local comprehensive plans, land conversions or conversions, telecommunication towers, and placement of utilities. Again, this section is not changing too much, but the proposed changes here are that some of the content will be shifting to the planning handbook or will be removed. So the main proposed changes for system protection includes moving content related to the process and criteria to the planning and trails handbook. So this includes moving and clarifying system protection criteria for action 2, conversions, action 3, telecommunication towers, and action 4, placement of utilities. And then lastly, there's a proposal to remove some content related to the reimbursement of contamination and environmental site assessments, since this language is already included in the Parks Acquisition Opportunity Fund program. So with that, we'd like to pause. We know this has been a lot of content, and it's time for you to chime in here. So can go back to any of the slides that you'd like. And then the questions before you are, what do you like about the 6 plan sections, and is there anything missing, and what questions do you have?
Okay. Questions and feedback, guys? Let's just start. Flips through. Yes, Bob?
Chair, and committee. On slide, in section 2, the system plan, as we talk about trails, I wonder what, if any, activities or strategy changes we're making because of e-bikes and high-speed need for transportation usage of our trail system. At least I haven't picked it up with my ears if we've addressed that. But I know that e-bikes are being more popular and therefore lower speed. And I know that the desire for transportation on bikes is increased. So are we doing anything on our side of it? Is there any coordination with the transportation department here at the council as it relates to that? Are we designating any time elements within our processes from, say, 6 to 8 in the morning, or so forth, for more usage of this kind of stuff? So I'll leave it.
Great question, Chair and Commissioners, Council Member. We are embarking on the last, I think, at night work group to talk about the regional bicycle transportation network and the regional trail system, and we'll bring that topic up. So thank you so much for that comment.
All right, so we'll see you later.
In the 90% plan, but great point, Bob. Safety is one of the topics that has come up a bunch, especially as it regards e-bikes and speed on trails.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big deal and a bigger deal. So I'll look forward to your comments.
Yeah, someone else mentioned that to me recently as well. Who else? Anthony?
Actually, I mean, a lot of the elements are really, really nice. Question, is there some statement related to the narrative as well? Like, because I think, and I don't remember where I saw it specifically, there are some language that is really good related to, I don't know what you use, cultural something.
Yeah.
But again, I think in terms of the last year, I think it seems like the implementers themselves are going through a major body of work around new narrative and how we're using, and I think that even in terms of belonging and those elements of that, is that the work on historical narrative relative to other cultural communities is a very big piece around belonging. And it doesn't really speak to, or even some emphasis also around identity, because I do think for us in Minnesota broadly, and for people who come here, the idea of the relationship around our identity to nature and outdoors and the history of it, so I think that that's something that would be useful, and you're headed there. Like some of the language around historical wrong and the way the policy has created what we're experiencing. I mean, really, in terms of the municipalities and everybody who's doing this work, nobody's statements are as strong as this one. Like I don't have to go, but these seem to be very, very direct. So is that?
Yeah, Chair Commissioners, I really appreciate the comment about adding belonging and identity related to the natural world and outdoors in general, to the conversation related to the cultural landscape classification.
Right, and that's what I do in cultural landscape there. Thank you for that's
Yeah,
what it was, cultural landscape. And so within that, something related to kind of the just what we're doing in I'm tired. But the
Indian Mounds Regional Park?
yeah,
No.
not Indian.
Or
Mountain Regional Park,
Wakantipi?
but every place is redoing the story they tell at the place. Like, they're really doing it.
Yeah.
And it hasn't worked, I'm thinking. But anyway, that idea of the narrative of what we're doing in terms of implementing or introducing this into the narrative interpretation. That's what everybody's reinterpreting their own space. I mean, and it seems like that's something that I've seen everywhere. Every implementing agency is doing something around interpretation. And so I think for us to also kind of lean around that idea of how we're using cultural narrative, and that's part of the, our regional parks, our policy plan.
Yep. Hear that, and I think that's also relevant to Chapter 7 or Section 7.
Which is coming up.
It's coming up.
Yep.
Yes, Bob?
Mr. Chair, in chapter 4, section 4, we talk about climate resilience policy and winter. And these are good and wholesome and nice feeling things. And my question to us is, are we making any of them measurable and specific so we can judge our progress on them?
Commissioner, and Commissioners, that's a great question, Bob. This is really another really new area that we're headed into with the regional parks and trail system. It's not new for the park agencies. They're in deep, they have climate action plans and whatnot. But talking about it as a region is new, and it's really new in the parks policy plan. So we've got some work ahead of us. We have added a couple climate researchers to our team, and we are interested in better supporting the climate work of the agencies. We're working, we recently got a grant from the Environmental Protection Agency that's helping us enable some of this work. And so it's funny, Bob, the way you set it up, because it's like everything here, like who want climate research, you know, coordination of climate awareness, it's all really good stuff. And it's a lot of it is initiating. So we're moving down the road, but we're not as far as we want to be. And the regional parks and trail system, the one thing that we've heard, and we had a great work group around this topic, is that there's a real commitment to it. The regional parks and trail system is a significant strategy when it comes to fighting climate change for our region, and it's work that we're going to continue to pursue.
Yeah, and I really am pleased to see it, because I think it's such an important part for our world. And I applaud the fact that it's a beginning. And I would just go on to say that we ought to consider challenging ourselves in some way, even if it's just a beginning. For example, we may say we want to improve non-renewable or using 10% renewable energy, or some, I don't know what, some minor start to begin putting some teeth into the comments. So I don't know what it is, but I do think that when you're dealing with things like this, having something that begins to be measurable and to make a difference kind of gets everybody's attention.
Sue and then
I was just gonna note, thank you, Mr. Chair, that council-wide, there's an effort to address the climate issue. It's part of the state initiative to reduce the carbon footprint. And I serve on a work group that has been dealing with that, and the metrics are real important. But as Emmett said, a lot of this is getting started. And as we get started, we get to know better what the challenges are. And then based on the challenges and the goals, we can figure out the specifics as it relates to metrics. I was gonna say something else, and I'm sitting too close to Anthony, and I now forgot what it was. Oh well, I'll figure it out. It's contagious. Thank you.
Anthony?
I was gonna ask Bob, and maybe even for implementing agencies, is there some element outside of, because I think the policy, you know, just like after going through a few of the policy plan, one, this is a fluid document, like we keep changing this over years, right? I feel like this is number 3 or something, you know, but so maybe the way that it is now is good here. Is there something else that we ask that is more tangible, like related to the actual operational work that implementing agencies are doing? Because every agency is cutting grass and is moving trucks, and there's an active footprint that they have related to just operation. I mean, you know, and is there something that I'm just saying outside of this, is there something that we want something more tangible? Is that something that would be of interest, you know, for us to pursue and think about? And then, because they all have a commitment to climate resilience and climate solutions as well. Like every one of them does that. So is there a way that we can tie it to our activity as a regional park system? And that's something that we can measure and can talk about.
Yeah. And maybe the beginning is simply having a measurable report of some kind. What is happening? What can anybody put their hands on? Are we doing solar lighting for various things on the trails, or you know, I'm sure the implementing agencies are doing something.
Yeah.
Maybe just gathering
Assessment.
an assessment and beginning the process. But I've had too much experience just putting general platitude stuff and nothing ever happens. So I would encourage us to move forward.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add real quickly, I don't know if any of you saw this, I'm sure you did, but Dakota County has issued a challenge to the cities in Dakota County regarding reducing their water consumption over the summer, which is when everybody wants to water their lawns and wash their cars and power wash their homes and all that kind of stuff. And it's a contest, it's kind of a cool deal. going forward, we might want to think about ways to either recognize or create a little sense of competition among the park agencies.
You bet.
I don't know what it would be, but I'm not getting any reaction from Marty or Jonathan, so I don't know if it's a good idea or not. Sorry.
They both have a plan.
I have plenty of thoughts on all of this, but I'll put them in writing, submit them to MPOS for review.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well,
Yes,
to
yes.
kind of this point that we're talking about, something that I think will never change is the impact of land that is in restoration or is in its natural state being completely untouched, and the impact that that land or that environment can have on our own impact. So maybe even having some statistics or information about all of the land that we purchase and are in the process of converting or leaving to its natural state, the impact that that can have next to some of this other work, I think would be kind of like a nice place to be in terms of just showing the importance of natural spaces and how they kind of take care of themselves, and then also are beneficial for us and some of the impact that we have on natural spaces with the trucks or mowing the lawns or the grass or anything like that. But that can be something that's pretty stationary, like that won't change, right? In those natural states, it's doing everything that we want to be doing. So kind of having that as the base or the core, and then how, I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, but moving towards that and having that be the stationary thing, and that's kind of what we're working towards, is keeping land safe and healthy. Made any sense? No, I think it didn't. I'm tired too.
Amanda, I know you have a time constraint. Is there anything that we should cover before that?
So, okay. I think everything looks good so far.
Just a broad bit of feedback from what I've noticed looking at this in terms of language. There seems to be a pattern of a lot of things that kind of describe how things are rather than prescribe. And so there might be some places where that's appropriate and others where it might not. I will have to, go through this to see if there's anything that actually concerns me. But I just noticed there's some that are like, this is done this way, or these are whatever, and considering whether we need to say that, or if we need to say it should be done this way, or we require it to be done this way. Because some of those, it's like, it's to this mixed audience thing where we're telling the public, this is how it is, and we're also telling our implementing agency partners, this is how you have to make it, in the same documents. That may be a little bit muddly. Like, I'm used to technical documents, and this is a little more flowery than my usual deal, so I have to see if there's anything where I actually care. But it's one thing I noticed that's a little bit different this time around. I also found one thing that, I don't know if there's more, but I'm wondering if there's other places that we need to highlight any actual changes that we haven't discussed yet. The one that jumped out at me while we were talking here is under the park reserve classification. Our existing policy has a statement about a requirement that at least 80% be left in natural state, and that requirement doesn't appear in this, which we can talk about whether that matters, but that's a actual policy change that we haven't reviewed so far, and it'd be good to have a list of any other things like that that occur in here, and I don't know if that was deliberate or an oversight or a little of each.
Chair, great point. We can add that. That's a state statute, as you know.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it is probably in the legislative part, but that park reserves be at least 80% protected status. So but
Yeah.
we can, that's important, so.
Yeah, it's part of the tricky thing of having, we're shuffling around different chapters of this, and then there's also some things where like, well, if we say that in 3 different places, do we need to?
We tried to consolidate all that.
And it's tough for us to keep track of, well, okay, so it disappeared from this one. Is it still in the other 2, or did we drop it? And yeah, so that's just
We'll add that.
something we're gonna have to spend time going through each page of this and seeing if there's anything that matters.
Thank you.
Yes, Bob?
Mr. Chair, to your point that you just raised there about it being covered 2 or 3 spots, I thought to myself earlier, I wonder if we have anything going on in our planning that says we are attempting to make life simpler by having fewer forms or consolidated kinds of applications or ways of making more efficient the work our agencies are asked to do and that we use for our review.
Yeah, I think we've heard some of that in meetings here as we're talking about things like there's this idea of making a planning handbook separately and what that might look like, which we haven't seen yet. We're going to get more of that next month. One thing that we don't have yet is that should go along with that sort of thing. And this also goes back to all the questions I was asking on our phone call yesterday. We should probably have a page on our website that not only links to each of the documents that we have that relate to this kind of stuff, but also has a paragraph or 2 describing this is the kind of stuff in this one, this is the kind of stuff in another one, and that actually maybe should also be somewhere in here. I think we kind of talked about that a little bit when we were talking about the intro text. Whatever we decide is guiding which thing goes where, we should tell people where to find them. Because I think we are making it simpler, but in the process also making it more confusing if we don't know that we did that. So we should tell people. Because there's some things that do make sense, but we need to have if you looked at a previous copy of this is over here now. Anyone else? Yeah, oh yes, Anthony.
Just kind of, we were kind of talking about this, but in Action 5 and Action 6, in climate resilience, it feels like it's starting to do what Bob is asking. But it won't go all the way or something, right? This is the council will work in partnership with the regional implementing agency to identify common goals and implementation steps in their local climate action plans to find projects that can be coordinated at a regional level. By supporting, it starts to do that. And then right under that, it talks about operational efficiency. Literally, operational efficiency and emerging strategies to adapt to climate change. And so it feels like it's all there but for some actual measure. It does start to do that. So I don't know, is that just, is there room to expand that for you?
And you've heard me mention before about various other kinds of things that I'd like to see more stuff generally about measurement. Some of it's, like we talked about, maybe doing something about winter visitation counts, things about what is our actual non-local visit stuff. For our equity grant program stuff, are we actually seeing results of that? Just across the board, we should think about which things can we measure, which things would we like to measure, but we maybe are admitting isn't feasible yet, but we want to call out as a future goal someday. I think just getting a little bit more quantitative and accountable would be good as a theme sprinkled throughout. Anything else? I had one thing, a terrible thought I had. I think the stuff in here is probably generic enough that it doesn't matter, but I'm wondering if there's anything that would need to be updated or flexible in the text of this document to address the what if the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund Amendment doesn't get renewed. I think that this is just a matter of, well, we'd have less money in that thing, but that might be something worth paging through and see if there's anything that actually becomes a policy problem in that event. For those that don't know, that amendment expires this year and it's on the ballot in the fall. So if people don't all go flip their ballots over and say yes, that money just vaporizes. Yes, Sue?
Mr. Chair, are you aware of whether or not there's an effort to communicate the importance of flipping the ballot and voting for it?
I haven't seen one yet. I'm sure there's probably planning going on, but of course, like if you actually went and talked to voters right now, no one would care. So they're probably just doing logistical planning. I would say if you want to know details about that, if you called Jeremy Peichel, he'd probably know.
Okay.
Because he's the one who brought it up to us initially to
Yeah.
let us know it was coming like 2 years ago. So I'm sure we know it's on somebody's radar. Exactly what they're doing about it, I'm not sure. And I know also Cecily was talking about there's a similar thing happening on the county level in Washington County. And I'm sure they would be doing some sort of coordination of those efforts. So she might know a little more as well.
Chair, we're operating as if it will pass. I mean,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and like
Something good's gotta happen in November.
yeah, I think that the odds of that are probably pretty good. I just don't want to like find ourselves at our December meeting going,
Great question.
oh, it turns out we have to do a whole public comment period and do an amendment to remove this one sentence because that conflicts with something, right? I could totally see that happen. If we have anything that math's wrong. Anything else? I know I'm gonna have to go like page by page through this to find whatever other questions I'm gonna have and probably send you emails later. Like, what about this thing?
I printed the document very much because I knew you'd read it.
Yeah.
Sandy printed the documents.
Oh, we talked before about long-range plan amendment process stuff. Is the intention that that will A, show up in the handbook and B, discuss the missing pieces of that then where that's listed at our June meeting?
Mr. Chair, I can jump in on that one. Yeah, you know, right now you see sort of the introduction to those topics in Section 5 planning. But the details of those will likely be found in the planning handbook, right? Like the long-range plan requirements, but also the details of the administrative process for minor long-range plan amendments, along with focused amendments. So those are still to come. I mentioned an opportunity both next month, where we'll focus more on the Parks and Trails Planning Handbook to talk about it then, and then a more focused discussion of the planning policy in July. That's the timeframe that we've got for the next 2 months to dig into those two topics. Not exclusively, but as part of the plan for next couple months.
Okay. Let me know if this is already in here somewhere, but one of the things I've been starting to talk to Emmett about, and we'll probably write some more about later, is with this idea of the planning handbook and also our grant administrative guide. I've been trying to think about what the relationship between these different documents is, and I probably want some pieces in here that describe procedural stuff for them, and along with the things about what to expect where content-wise, but just also how do those come to be, how do they get amended, what other things, like, so there's also a policy that says a tiny bit of stuff that's internal to the council, letting people know which things are covered in those, just some administrative stuff that I'm gonna wanna see somewhere, and I haven't figured out exactly what that looks like yet. But I'd also ask, for any other commissioners, with those kinds of splits, think about which things you think should be in each kind of a document and whether you care about different sorts of processes for those. Like, what is your cutoff for this part needs this level of discussion, this part needs this level of discussion, approval, that sort of thing, and let us know if there's any that are important to you. Anything else? We have a lot of time left, you guys.
We have to go on to section,
And of course, we do have two more
Okay.
sections
Two more
to
sections.
present.
the fun will
You
continue.
can go
Yeah,
on to
we're
your
not
next
done
one.
yet.
We could leave early, there's not a problem.
Yeah, okay,
We'll fill any space you give us, Bob.
go ahead.
Thank you.
We're just gonna step
Thank
away,
you.
stand up.
That's right, we had to swap out staff.
Yeah. This has been a really large undertaking, I'll tell you, so everyone's showed up.
Except Hillary, so.
We're here to let the party continue, Tony. Oh, there's even music. Was that celebrating our arrival?
What did you say?
I said we're here
Thanks,
to
man.
let the party continue.
Oh, good, okay.
Chapter 7. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Amanda Lovely. I'm the Parks and Trails Ambassador here. And do you want to introduce yourself now?
Again, Jessica Lee, Parks Planner.
Here we are. All right, Chapter 7. So there were some pretty significant changes to Chapter 7, which we worked with the agency work group to come to conclusion to make these big changes, and also through community engagement over the last 3 years. Starting with the title of our chapter, so recreation facilities and programming. We added the word programming. It may seem small, but it is big. Policy and action. So our policy is foster a sense of belonging by providing a wide spectrum of leisure and play opportunities while connecting people and places to the natural world. So this chapter has 4 actions. Each of them have shifted just a bit, but the big changes I'm going to go over in the next slide so that we don't keep you here until 9 p.m. At least that won't be me and Jessica's phone when that happens. All right, so here are the big proposed changes for this chapter. So again, we really worked on in Action 1 to increase equity. We moved it from Action 2 back up to top to the first action. We removed the list. I'd say that's probably the biggest change to our chapter, and took a lot of dialogue with our agency work group and our own internal team. But the list of activities, we removed the list that was created in 1974.
Wow.
Yep, before I was born, in case anyone was curious. And we now have a criteria-based evaluation system on what activities will be approved or not and how to approve them. We also added Action 3, which is cross-sector opportunities, which is again just really focusing on parks don't exist in a bubble, and how do we partner outside of the world of parks with public health, with art, with transportation, education, health. Like, what is the relationship that we have to other sectors and how can we work together? And then Action 4 we were added, which I would like to give to Bob.
Thank you.
I'm going to read it directly to you.
Thank you.
Raising awareness.
Yes.
We were
Good.
listening, Bob. We've been listening.
That's good, good, I appreciate it.
In parentheses, I'll write Bob over next to it for you. But we added Action 4, which is something that our team really believes in. But again, raising awareness and really connecting people to our regional park system.
Wonderful.
And with that, we can have a discussion, questions, thoughts, concerns, hopes, dreams. We're here for it all. Chapter 7, the best chapter.
Okay, yes, Sue?
If I could go ahead and make a comment, I'm kind of jumping the gun here. Several weeks ago, I serve on the Minnesota Age-Friendly Council, which was initiated by the governor several years ago, and it started out as a governor's task force, and the legislature has since funded it. And I represent the council on the Age-Friendly Council, and several weeks ago at a meeting, we meet virtually. I think we've had one in-person meeting, and that was just after the task force was formed and just prior to the pandemic. But because it's a statewide organization, the virtual meetings have continued. And we had a presentation by a woman, and I apologize, I didn't bring along my notes, but she's very steeped in the impact of nature and parks and trails on aging people. And I think Action 1 can encompass this, but I just want to stress that it's really important for us to remember that those who are aging, as well as those who have physical or emotional or mental disabilities, also need that nature and that nature experience. And I was really pleased with this last round of equity grants because there were several grant requests that were approved that address that, and I think we've got to continue to work on it. As you know from the demographic presentation that was given a while back, the aging population is the fastest, the aging, we're the fastest growing population in the state, and we're not going away anytime soon, so it's important to remember us.
As for those of us born before 1975.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
In case you were wondering.
Thank you.
Just want to clarify that.
Some of us are overqualified for the definition, so me being one of them. And actually, I'd like to create an opportunity at some point, Mr. Chair, for this person to come and talk to IMPAS. I was just blown away by how good she is, and I'm a big fan of Richard Louv, the guy who wrote the book about the importance of nature for children and childhood development. And it just, having been through the loss of several elderly family members, it's kind of, what he writes is almost what she's telling us in reverse. And it's that whole cycle of life. It's pretty fascinating.
Nice.
I'd be open to that if we have a spot on the calendar someday.
Yeah, I'll get the name. I just wrote a note.
Well, I just want to say thank you for getting rid of that list, because I don't think that there needs to be an activities list required in order to be out in nature or enjoying these natural spaces, and even putting it out there makes it feel like you have to be responsible to do those activities. So thank you for getting rid of that. And also the cross-sector opportunities, I feel like is really exciting. There's such a separation between like nature and our regular lives, and that shouldn't be the case at all. And having them kind of intertwined will make it more likely that people will care about natural spaces and go out of their ways to enjoy them and then also protect them. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I think it's going to be helpful that now I have an actual draft to work with, because we've been talking for a long time about possibly getting rid of this list, but then if we do, what goes in place of it instead? Like, if you get rid of the list, that opens up other possibilities, and the question is, some of those possibilities are good, some of them might be bad. So look through these and spend some time thinking of hypotheticals like, is there anything that doesn't meet these criteria that you think should be eligible? And is there anything that does meet these new criteria that you think shouldn't be eligible? And are there any tweaks that we want to make to these kinds of criteria to guide that? Because it makes sense to have something more as criteria rather than a list, but we want to make sure that those criteria are sufficient to guide what we actually need.
Question,
Yes, Bob?
Mr. Chair. Okay. First of all, I'm really pleased to see the articulation of the awareness. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the wording of leveraging affinity groups. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, it's really connecting to organizations already doing this work and organizations deeply connected in community and the outdoors to help raise awareness. So I think we were, in writing this one, thinking a lot about who already has those connections and how are they already connecting to their community and how can regional parks engage through organizations, not just out on like I sometimes joke if the Met Council does a social media campaign, you know, I think there's like 12 people who follow us. Versus if we work with Anthony and Anthony does a social media campaign, it'll go out into the world much farther
Sure.
through the reach of an organization that's already doing the work. And like on the weekend, you don't really go to the Met Council's website and like, where do I want to go this weekend in the outdoors? Right, but we have so many great partners that we work with, that the agencies work with, and how do we better partner with the people already doing some of that work to
Right.
get the word out.
Okay, so, now I understand. So Midwest Mountaineering in the past would be that kind of, but this does not preclude the Met Council as well as the implementing agencies from expanding the language.
Yep,
I just wanted to be sure of that.
Expanding, funding, supporting.
Yeah.
I can give another good example in addition to Anthony's. And I've been active with the Friends of the Mississippi River. And I learned a lot about the regional parks through them.
Yeah.
There were some that I had no idea existed until I got involved with them. So
Yeah.
those partnerships are real important.
Great.
I have a question.
Yes, Ann?
You know, and I want, just at the end, when you begin to talk about, particularly the coordinated work around the regional trail system. And I was looking at my computer reading and I lost that place, but I think, the area around the regional bicycle transportation network. And those two paragraphs, they, is there something, and actually, is there something where we do more, I don't know, just make stronger language around defining the regional trail system, establishing some new standards relative to what is developed as we kind of go new, you know what I mean? And Tony, you probably the only one who knows, is that section 8820 inside of that, you know, thing, is that where the guides around trail width and accompanying walkways, all of that live in that section?
The trail section is an action on chapter 7, but that work group specifically to trails, I'll pass to Emmett,
So it's coming.
hasn't started.
It's coming, yeah.
Yeah, so it is not
Okay.
part of my team's leading it.
Well, so Anthony's also raising something that I mentioned to Emmett before, but I don't know if we've talked to you about it. There's the trail design standards thing, which is just as I understand it, an internal Met Council document that's not in any of our policy stuff today. So if we're just reworking things even between the policy plan and the planning handbook, it still might not appear in either of those, and the question is, should it? And if it does, should it possibly say something different from today? Because like right now, that document has just said paved trails of a certain width, and we've had some discussions about should we have more possibilities for unpaved trails or dual treadway trails. And since those don't appear in the documents that we see, that's always been sort of unclear about how would we address that and if we want to. So some of those kind of nitty-gritty design standard kind of things maybe should be going into this planning handbook if that's going to be, like, they probably don't need to be in the policy plan, so that's why they were off in this other thing. But now if we're going to have another handbook-y kind of thing, maybe some of those things that are internal should be brought into that.
And that language is, I mean, that's pretty strong language about the regional network. I mean, that starts to talk about that, because that's one of the things I would say that, you know, when we attended a conference last year, there was definitely a very significant difference in terms of scale, you know, relative to how they were thinking about regional trail systems, and in doing that, opened themselves up to more federal funding to get more stuff done. That was, I mean, it was, and I think our trail system felt as long, but again, we didn't have a view of it in a real way as a regional trail system with the regional standards and thinking about it. And I would say, you know, it might be interesting for us as well as we think about this, the reconnecting communities funding. No one has really gone after that with bike money. I mean, you know, for increasing active transportation, walking, biking, and connected work. And adjacent to every one of those places where we're gonna, you know, do a land bridge or whatever, you know, is something around around bike trails, and I think around biking, walking, and access generally. And I would say as an exercise, I'm pushing myself to, it is bike, ped, walk, all access, and we're experiencing this on the Midtown Greenway. And I will say all implementing agencies who have an all-terrain wheelchair in the system, is that I have gotten more personal emails about that than anything that we've ever done. And so literally, I've got like 10, and I was at a party the other night and came up, and so, for us to really lean into this work around access, all access, and generally, and especially because our trail system is a place where those community members they actually enjoy it in a tremendous way. I mean, better than any place, it's a place, and part of it is the predictable nature of the surface alone, just makes a huge difference. The connectivity, they know there's gonna be curb cuts, so we're achieving that in a way and really not calling it out. So, but again, just thinking, and we don't speak to that much in this part of the document, but I do think both of those sections, they're getting there, and it may be, and the work group is coming, so we can lean into that. But I think it's something for us that can be really useful, and the backbone of it is there.
And along some of that, I put a question to Sue to ponder, if not necessarily answer today. We've been talking for a long time about trying to coordinate better with the other silos of the Met Council and the regional bicycle trail network things. Transportation network has some parts of that. And now that we're having the entire regional development guide as kind of a one thing rather than the more separate documents, is that improving this, and should we say anything different about how the overlap between RBTN and regional trails works, and anything that we need to be aware of for classifications and funding eligibility and stuff like that? Like one thing I'm thinking of is, as a parallel, the county state aid highway and municipal state aid highway systems, where counties and cities go through and okay, these are all roads that the county or the city maintains, but we're gonna mark this one and this one and this one as the ones that we say are at a certain level, and that makes them eligible for a different pot of state funding. Would that be something that we should be doing with our regional trails and say, these are the ones that we believe, based on their long-range plans, serve a certain percentage of transportation purpose, and that's how that, should that be highlighted in the things that we see as well as the things that transportation sees, and should that appear in here anywhere?
That's really brilliant, the idea of elevating
Yeah.
the transportation status in terms of how we fund and support it.
Yeah.
I think
Well, and there is a bike advocate who serves on the Transportation Advisory Board, which is a regional transportation planning board, meets monthly, very active board, and they dole out a chunk of change to a lot of people. But Emmett and I will talk about that and see, this is something where I think we need to have some conversations with our transit partners, so, yeah.
Yeah, basically a good opportunity for you to bring that across the silos.
Well, I serve on the Transportation Committee, so
Yeah.
it's easy to do.
Yes, Bob?
Mr. Chair, building on Anthony's line of thought, the basics of a system-wide signage and wayfinding protocol has long seemed to me to be called for from us as a Met Council, with the advice and counsel of our implementing agencies. And I just, as you were talking, Tony, I just was wondering, is there anything in the state or the DNRs or the Minnesota Trail Association, does anybody have a sort of standard nomenclature for signage and wayfinding that we could build on? Or is there anything that anybody knows of that we should be embracing? But I just would say, in our long-range planning, if we don't have one, I would encourage us to set that as a goal for ourselves to achieve that.
I would suggest that that's really a conversation that might need to start with the agencies. Because I'm guessing that a number of the agencies have invested money already, and to start over might be, or, you know, they may be able to share their ideas and they can be, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I just think we need to start with the agencies on this.
And I'm all in favor of that, I mean,
Yeah.
Three Rivers has got a great system,
Yeah.
and I think St. Paul does as well. But I don't know, I don't quite know how to put that together, I'm just saying, it would be desirable, I believe, to have something that we could begin to try to coalesce around.
Yeah, I mean, I also wonder, what is the overall industry status of standardizing wayfinding stuff? Like, I know for highway stuff for cars, there is a giant document that describes everything you could possibly want to know about signage across the entire country. And there's, you know, standards for all of that everywhere. And then there's, of course, a totally different standard that applies to everywhere except the US because reasons. But, you know, that's, you know, reasonably standardized. And is there stuff that addresses that similarly for recreation facilities? Has someone done that nationwide? Or if we tried to do it across our region, would that be, you know, the first time anyone's even tried that? Can we tie into something bigger? I have no idea how mature that kind of thing is.
So, Tony, who else has a regional authority connected to Portland?
Oh,
Is
God.
it? Is it-
I think that's one, there might be one more. It's not a
Any?
lot.
Yeah, they don't even, in their regional authority, they don't include parks.
They just do the zoo in Portland.
Yeah, I mean, that's, so,
Yeah.
so it might be the first thing, it might be the first time I ever tried. Like, I really don't know another regional, I mean, there's like,
But someone might have also done something similar just at the state level, even if it's not through their Metropolitan Planning Agency.
That Bay Area trail.
yeah,
That's like
I agree.
You know, and this is another one of those where it might be really smart to start out with an assessment.
Yeah.
And let agencies tell us what they've got and what their needs are, and share their ideas with each other. And then determine if there's a role for MPOS to play in any other kind of work.
Start with the very small version of an assessment, which is an email being like, are you guys already doing this?
Right, exactly. And to be real honest, I think that from my perspective, and I don't have the depth of knowledge that you guys have on this, but it seems to me that each park agency and even each park within those agencies has unique characteristics. And so their wayfinding may be unique as well, and how they do it. But there may be those that are struggling, and so they could get ideas from each other. But I hate for us to overlabor this with park agencies that are already really busy.
The other thought that I had along that, which isn't necessarily your on-the-ground wayfinding, but your facility visit planning kind of stuff. We talked before about how to find out which park or trail offers what kind of experience and know where to go for your interests and skill levels and things like that. And in here, under the equity stuff, you know, we're talking about things like bathroom facility types and frequency and water, and we've talked about accessibility of watercraft launches and things like that. Maybe on our council published maps of things, we should be able to identify, here's where bathrooms are located, here's which ones of those are ADA accessible, here's the places along trails that you can get water. Because some of that kind of stuff does cross agency boundaries. If they're trying to go, well, I want to find a park where I can go with whatever restrictions I have, you don't want to have to separately go look up each implementing agency to see if they have one, if there's a way to just go to the council and be like, oh, these three. And those would be some of the kinds of things that would stand out for that.
Is there something, Tony, is there something that we, that even as we do this, we also have considerations related to state parks? I mean, or is it, I mean, it's outside of our thing, but is that something?
Yeah.
Because it's such a part of a progression when I think about people who are growing in their capacity to be outdoors,
Yeah,
and the
some of
continuity
that-
of state parks really helps, right? That you can go from park to park to park
and I haven't looked at it in this draft yet, but I know one of the things that we're changing a little bit in here is how we call out our relationships to other systems. So
Yeah, I
we'll have to
noticed
go
that
read
too.
what that
Actually,
says.
it was a number of times that you specifically talked about that we are part of,
System.
in Minnesota, we're part of this system. So that's what kind of made me think about it. It's the first time I've seen that reference in terms of progression and just thinking about it, and I anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I had another thought. Similar to the criteria question and what I was saying earlier about is it just descriptive or does it give enough guidance? I know there's several things in here where it has desired outcome examples. And I just say the part to consider with all those is examples are examples, not policies. So look at the policies above them and say, does this sufficiently describe everything we mean to produce these examples versus looking at the examples and seeing if that covers it. So those are just trying to say the result of the thing above it and could be changed by other people's interpretations of the other thing. So it's just multiple positions of that, of outcome examples, that language. Yes, David.
Just a thought here, and maybe this will garner me some rotten tomatoes thrown this way, but this is a great document, policy plan. I'm just wondering in terms of like consumption of it. It's kind of daunting. So I'm wondering if if this is geared towards the general public as well as people that are in the creation of using this as a guiding principle while they're in their jobs. I don't know, we ever thought of like having a kind of a very abridged, even like a video of like, here's what's encapsulated by our policy book, and just like a quick 60, 120 second kind of thing that just like hits on these things with some imagery that's very key to what all these different levels are. Maybe we have something like that already, I don't know.
I don't think we do, but
I can answer this question.
all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Lisa Barajas. I'm the Executive Director of our Community Development Division. And I work with our other division directors and our communications team on some of these bigger questions that you're asking. And actually, that's part of our communications plan as this plan gets adopted, is to we're doing planning for a full-scale upgrade of our website, including various media ways to enter into this work and understand it in a consumable format, not in the bureaucrat's book that we have, which we of course dearly love. But looking at all of those different ways that we are interacting with different audiences, and that includes things not just what's on our website, but also one-page collaterals that we also bring out for conversations. We meet a lot with legislators, for example, too, so we like to be able to sum up what does our policy mean, what's the big picture policy, what are the individual areas, and then other types of communication efforts that kind of go around with that as well. So it is part of the larger plan, but that's to come like after we've completed the policy work.
Lisa will be starring in a rap video about the policy plan.
Thank you.
Anthony, did I see a hand from you earlier too? No?
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay.
Are you ready to move on to the finance section?
Possibly.
Martin, I have just one comment, as we talk about the policy plan as a whole and how it might be changed, I think the definition of a regional park maybe needs to be stronger. My concern here is that as we start maybe morphing things, how much more similar we might become to another park system.
And so if we're going to, for instance, not have activities that are defined, and other agencies or other cities, if you will, may have systems that are very similar to ours. And so as you go through the legislative process, if you will, if we're not able to define ourselves different than a city park system, there's an opportunity, I think, for, I'll say, the legislature to begin to see other parks, if you will, as regional parks. There's other 100-acre city parks.
If your system is different, why does it need to be separate as a thing?
You know, why are you getting funding?
Why are they funded?
I would be interested to see emails from park agency people with kind of descriptions of what you think the delineation is between the regional stuff and non-regional things that might be administered by your own organization, and things that are even more local than that, and things that are above the regional. Like, if you were to write this definition, what would it look like? Because we're trying something, but yeah, that has always been sort of a gray area of what is this line? We want it to be a thing, but defining that has been hard. So for the people that are the ones that come to us for our system plan and say, we want you to designate this one as regional, what are driving those conversations to decide you want to ask that, and what do you think we should consider? That'd be useful.
Mr. Chair, again, some of the things in the past that have helped define the system has been size and attendance from, I'll say, outside of your agency organization, your jurisdiction area, activities, and by essence, just being part of the metro area agency, the 7 counties and the special park districts.
So, commissioners and Marty, that's a great point. And so look at this hard. I know that Marty, his region, Carver County, does have some very urban areas, but then it has a lot of growing areas that don't yet have a lot of local park and trail amenities that are looking to Marty to provide those things. And that's what like park dedication fees are for, that they create a local park system that serves those near home opportunities. We still try to serve near home opportunities, but we do have a unique niche where we're large acreage, we're drawing from a regional audience, and we're natural resource based. So make sure that comes through, because those are really important and defining characteristics. So
Yeah.
I'll take a look at it too.
For what it's worth, that serve a regional audience one is a big part of what I'm thinking in terms of measurement and accountability. And like we say that, well, one thing that we could do is if we actually measured better what our percentage of non-local visits are, that would give us some real hard evidence of, is this being used as a regional park or not? Because it's part of the idea of opening up the activities stuff a little bit more. If they say, well, here's a new kind of activity and we think it'll have a regional draw, well, okay, a few years later, tell us, did it have a regional draw? If it did, awesome. If it didn't, well, okay, maybe we misjudged that and we should change that up a little bit. But I think that would be it's hard to measure, but it would certainly be the clearest line for, well, yeah, if it's getting regional use, then it's probably a regional importance. Anthony.
And I'll say that, the experience particularly for the parks that are close for us with Minneapolis, as the regional parks in the city, what's happening is we're really struggling around the idea of the activities. And I think that's what's beginning to do, so definition, so as we walk away from activities and we do definition and then we have a way to measure it, is probably, it actually is a really good point. That's an interesting point for us to consider, because it is changing, right now. And two of the things that we're doing a lot of, I was just teasing, we're doing pickleball and we're doing skate park, and those are two of the ones that are really most interesting. And relative to this idea of regional draw, to the activities themselves? Are the natural amenities important for those activities to exist? You know, and at the same time, they have a regional draw, we're supporting active living, getting people in nature, but, you know, all those things are happening simultaneously, but those two are the big ones. And even the conversations around biking with the new pump tracks that we're creating. You know, that's one of the ones that is in that first ring, we're seeing that's a one that is, you know, families seem very excited about it. They're relatively inexpensive to create relative to their usage, and I mean, there's a lot there. And again, is that regional? You know, does that actually have a regional draw?
And the flip side of that is we've also historically said sometimes, well, maybe things are regional if they get people involved in an activity that later will be regional, but if we're getting away from activities, is that still an argument or is that different? Sue?
Jonathan's had his hand up.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I was gonna go to them next, I wasn't sure if you had another thing.
Yep, no.
Thank you.
Yes, Jonathan?
Anthony, you just nailed it perfectly. It's really about getting people into the outdoors. And some of our parks are very urban. And in my opinion, whatever you can do to get people outside is allowable. But the legislature was very clear as to what we were not supposed to do in these parks. Big, giant sports complexes. They have a life of their own. They don't need to be in a nature-based system. I'm kind of struggling as to what problem we're trying to solve here. The problems I'm aware of that precipitated sort of a review of Section 7 was that the city of Minneapolis wanted to do a skate park in the Cones. And there was heartburn over that. There shouldn't be heartburn over that. It's getting kids into a park. God, that's the whole purpose of our existence, is to get people outdoors. And let's not worry about it. I would strongly encourage MPOS to think at the regional level and at the regional systems level. When we talk about individual parks, maybe not having that desired 40% magic number of non-resident visitation, I would argue that it's unimportant what the non-resident visitation is to a single unit. What's really important is, do you have enough parks close to where the people who need them live? And are those parks being operated together as a system? And we don't need to get into the rabbit hole on details. We need to draw back and look at a global approach to all of this. So when I look at Section 7, we talk about criteria, and I'm seeing a bunch of beautiful ideas here. I think that's really cool. Does it belong in a policy plan? Probably not. I'd much rather have just 7 statements saying things that are appropriate in the regional park system will strive to meet these 7 things, these 7 actions. And then I would list my actions, and then maybe I'd have illustrations in images, but I wouldn't have pages of narrative after them, because the tendency for a future MPOS who didn't write this would be to use that narrative as a definitive as to what is allowed and what isn't allowed. That's what happened before, when Arnie Steffer wrote the original plans back in the 80s. And I don't think he ever meant for it to be such a definitive document, but he used it as an example and it became definitive. So I'll get off my soapbox, but thank you for allowing me to speak.
Did you have another thing, Marty?
Well, just think I'll say to add on to what Jonathan had said. So again, the concern about what I'd say is somebody interpreting regional use would be just that example, the sports example. I've got a state tournament in one of our regional park area, or in a, I'll say, city park area. And why isn't that regional as compared to somebody else? So anyhow, defining what is a regional visit and maybe excluding what I'll say is tournaments or kind of one-time activities from being regional might be a part of that. So my concern is just how do people interpret that? The friendly example, you know, in terms of, I'll say, what they're doing right now as a city park system, wanting to join the regional park system, and you know, finding ways to get it that clearly define what our regional park system is.
I think I would just point out the obvious of the reason we're having this conversation at all is because of money. the idea of we just want to get people outside. If we had unlimited resources, then we wouldn't have to care about how we did that. We just say, get everybody outside. But when we get into at what level does that happen, it's because the legislature allocates a certain amount of funding to our system and a certain amount of funding to other people's systems. And how does that work? And is our scope of responsibility matching up to our scope of the portion of the available funding? So we just want to make sure that we're operating kind of within what our budget seems to be indicating we're supposed to be doing, because if we try to, of course, we have at the end of this the cost to complete the system thing, which is a huge number, and we have our operations and maintenance number, which is a huge number that we're funding a teeny tiny portion of, and we're hearing that that's a significant pain point for all of our implementing agencies. Well, if we start saying that, well, everything's a regional facility, then those numbers are both going to get bigger and the funding isn't going to follow. So it's just a question of saying, what can we actually afford to do? If the legislature comes to me tomorrow and says, hey, we want to give you $8 billion, awesome. I don't think that's going to happen. So that's where I'm trying to figure out how we fit in, just so we can give people a realistic expectation of, we think we can actually do that. I said this at a previous meeting, possibly before some of you were appointed, of whatever we put in this plan, I want to be realistic so people can look at that and look at our system plan part and be like, oh, this is what they actually intend us to offer, and have it mean maybe actually in your lifetime, rather than a completely pie in the sky imaginary thing of we'd like to do this, but it's never going to actually occur. And that's where that comes down. So.
Jessica, let's jump into
That's a
finance.
good transition.
Because the next is month.
Thanks.
Thing died.
Yeah, it can be a clicker.
All right, so first I'll just give an overview of our proposed changes. Overall, we reordered the content, so we took what were all strategies before and we turned them into 6 actions and 6 statutory requirements. And then we have a new policy statement, and then we also removed some language that was pretty redundant and is also present in the grant administration guide. So a lot of procedural stuff that didn't need to be in policy we took out. And then we removed what was strategy 5, the future reimbursement consideration, as we determined that's no longer legal. For our equity action, we expanded the language for the equity grant program because we have more history now for that and more years of the program. And we are proposing removing the language for the equity toolkit link and putting that into the planning handbook. Action 4, for Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund, this is probably a most significant change. Now we're proposing increasing the program cap to $2 million for the legacy fund and $3 million for the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. Right now it's at 1.7 and it's been there for a very long time. So we have not adjusted for inflation, and even these numbers don't really adjust for inflation, but they get us closer. And we have one new action, which is action 6, regional funding commitment. The council will actively analyze its regional funding budget strategy and pursue increasing regional funding commitment for the system whenever possible. And so these are our 6 actions, and our new policy statement reads to administer and provide financial oversight of the state and regional funding to the 10 regional park implementing agencies in support of the regional parks and trail system. Before, it was just a little bit more subjective. It said provide adequate and equitable funding, and what does that mean? So we wanted something more straightforward. And these are 6 actions. Again, most of them haven't changed too much. And I already read you the new one, so let's move on. And here's our 6 statutory requirements. None of these are new. These were all within the strategies before, but we just thought they weren't really policies so much as statutory. So we moved them over. We'll be updating the 5-year CIP, of course, and the cost to complete the system, but otherwise it's not really changing. So that's all I've got. I'm happy to take questions.
Questions on this part? Yes, Anthony.
Is there, as we is there any, I don't know, if implementing any tension or, and even in that, the consideration of going up in the CIP, those numbers, is there any, consideration relative to the, you know, inside the urban core versus outside the urban core costs per acre kind of element to it? Is this everybody's, does that make sense?
Yeah, for the cost to complete the system.
Yeah, so when you look at the cost, so you've got that, you know, inside the MUSA and outside the MUSA, you know, it's such a huge
Yeah.
differential.
I can actually, so, Chair Commissioners, we're actually working on that using actual GIS data and
Okay.
parcel data. And so we'll use averages when we need to, but we're gonna actually have real numbers for a lot of the parcels. So it'll be a lot more, well, it should be more accurate. It'll be based on market value, not appraised value, of course.
Thanks.
So we might see significant changes to the cost to complete the system as a kind of breaking change, similar to whatever it was, like 8 years ago when we changed calculation for that.
Perhaps, but what we've noticed so far is it's startlingly accurate. Like, we're surprised at how accurate those averages are.
Okay.
So, we'll see.
I would say I don't have specific feedback today, but this is probably a section that you'll be hearing from me later on, because I want to go back and look at some of the changes that have happened over multiple revisions of this and see where we kind of stand, and see if there was anything that we needed to catch previously. Because this was something that had some significant upheaval before that I'd have to go back and look at. Anyone else? I know there's at least some places that do this, but in seeing previous conversations too, it would be good when we have things that are statutory requirements. We should probably have notes of that. And like some of them, it makes sense to kind of note it in the text. And I don't know how this will be formatted, but there might also be places where it's just appropriate to have a sort of parenthetical in the margin, like this is related. Like we don't necessarily have to explain it, but if you care about this piece, go look at this too. Like some of the formulas are in statute, and like we don't necessarily need to say statute blah 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 has this formula, statute blah 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 has this formula, but if this mentions this is done by formula, this one might be good, just so we know, why is that formula not spelled out on this page if it maybe previously was. It's like, well, because it's in this other thing, similar to what we talked about before. Here's where to find it. Oh, the reimbursement consideration thing, that was news to me. What happened there? It's no longer legal thing?
That's yesterday's news, Tony. No, there was a IRS change that prevents us from even considering using tax-free bonds on things that agencies are buying, but then they'll be slowly reimbursed for through the CIP. So
Yeah, we stopped doing it about, was it 2 years ago?
I think it was more than
3
that.
already?
COVID era.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is not a change from our own legislature. This is a specific to the tax exempt status thing.
Yes.
Okay. I was like, was there a bill that I didn't know about? Like, no, it's just.
And the agencies, we've been working with them, they're not all happy about it, but they know that it's no
Yeah.
longer.
I
Good thing Marty left.
Yes.
He's not happy.
I noticed that we hadn't seen that included in any of our business items for a while, but I didn't know if that was just because they didn't need to or something else.
No, it was a change in.
Bother.
It's devastating news, especially for agencies like Marty. And I would strongly encourage the council to consult with some economists and tax experts and whatnot to see if there's workarounds. I believe there are. There's almost always workarounds. Maybe not for a direct reimbursement, to create a shell company, so to speak, that can do acquisitions for the region, and which can be reimbursed. I don't believe this issue is totally dead unless you guys want it to be dead.
That's true. There are certainly, and not necessarily for that reason, but I know the DNR does stuff like that all the time just because of timelines. If it's well, we don't expect to get allocations to that particular budget for another 4 years, but there are several nonprofits that will that are able to move quickly, essentially, because government is not fast. So a parcel comes up for sale and somebody else goes, done, buy it tomorrow, where government can't do that. And then 6 years later, they create an agreement to then sell it to the DNR. So that sort of thing would be possible. The other question, this is way above my pay grade, but if it's a federal rule change, the question is it something that's appropriate for the council to consult with our various Congress members about as a possible thing to change from that level?
Chair, you might not know this about me, but I am not a financial expert. However, this is a practice, the future reimbursement consideration is a practice that people in finance never liked. They always were deeply troubled by it. And when we talked to the finance people in the agencies, they understood it immediately. One of the, like Jonathan's point is a good one. I think one of the best things we can do is get more acquisition money. And raising the caps will help some too. The idea that we can help agencies. Jessica is using incredible creativity with like Washington County staff right now in terms of like staging acquisitions over multiple years so that if we can work with willing sellers and they're okay with that, we can get large significant acquisitions done. It sometimes takes a few more years, but effectively and to everybody's satisfaction. The problem is just that we did have, like, and when we did future reimbursement before, like when we said, okay, well, you want to get reimbursed for this through your future share of your regional
CIP.
parks, bonding program. There were about 25, this is not guaranteed. There were all these disclaimer statements made just because there were people that were very uncertain with that. And so I know that their expectation was still there, but it was, and I know that it hurt the smaller agencies more, which is hard to see.
I'm thinking this is probably something where if we were going to do something about it, it would probably involve direction from the council level saying what your level of interest is in doing various hoop jumping. Because like we can accommodate things if they are comfortable doing that, but it might involve some things that aren't necessarily our place to say because it gets more into the financial instrument realm more than the park policy realm. But yeah, it's certainly, I think there are some possible workarounds, but they do get complicated.
Well, and I used to be on a National Park Trust Board. It's not a National Park Service Board or any of the bigger ones, but it's a good board that's done good work in helping national parks acquire land. And I would guess that this is an issue for the national parks as well.
Could be. Yes, Bob?
I don't pretend to understand all the nuances of this, but I do know that both for Carver County and Scott County, they feel really disadvantaged by the current plan. And anything we could do to make it more feasible for them to acquire the land they need at this point in time makes a lot of sense. So I'm speaking for pragmatics, not that I understand all the little pieces of the equation.
One thing we are looking at that'll be part of Chapter 9, the work plan for the next 4 years, is exploring the local match requirement for PAOF. We can't change it right now because it's already in our ENRTF appropriation language for our next funding that will provide that match. So we can't really change it now, but in the next 4 years, we're going to explore looking at decreasing possibly the local match. We've had 1 or 2 agencies say they don't want us to do that, but most agencies probably would, so.
The other thing that we've said, and let me put words in my boss's mouth, is the council is looking at ways to more effectively leverage regional funds into the regional system. So we're looking at ways to increase our contribution to the regional parks and trail system. And that's a real commitment, and that is the new strategy too, so stay tuned.
Yeah, that makes sense. There probably will be other categories of this kind of thing in the work, well, whether they appear in the work plan or not, but yeah, in the next 4 years.
I have a quick question for Jonathan. Jonathan, from your experience, how often has your agency or other agencies that you know of partnered, say, with the Trust for Public Land or some nonprofit to help with acquisition?
I've heard about it happening a couple times,
Okay.
not with Three Rivers, but I believe Dakota County did it.
Yeah.
And the other St. Clair County.
You know, that's one of the things that we could help facilitate or convene the conversation for Scott and Carver on finding out about those resources and yeah.
Well, I mean, the point that obviously you understand, but is this, that we have at this point in time, some of this rural land that won't last forever. And the time to buy it is now, when it's still relatively cheap, even though we don't necessarily hit all the points needed to score well in terms of the tab or whatever the current measurement system.
Yeah. And that being a imbalance across our system where some of our agencies are really focused on development and some of our agencies are really focused on acquisition because they just don't even have the land yet.
Yeah.
So having certain rules and formulas for everybody has always been kind of awkward, and that reimbursement consideration thing was a provision to essentially even that out and recognize the difference in their needs, because it just sort of shifted some stuff from this pot over here through magical math, and now we've got the imbalance back because that's gone. Anthony?
So in terms of what Susan is talking about, is there, even other nonprofits, is this an opportunity for us to do kind of friends of strategy inside the regional park system? That's, you know what I mean, that's kind of how state park stuff, the boundary, friends of the boundary waters, all they do is organize money to capture stuff, hold, and, so I don't know, Jonathan, do we have that kind of mechanism working so that the nonprofits are dedicated to Carver County? I mean, that it's a group that's working with them, it's something to gain efficiency in over time because it is related to land acquisition and transfer and those kind of things.
We, I would say, don't have something like that now. And part of your question is going to be, how much do you gain by being dedicated and familiar with a particular area versus how much do you gain by having the expertise of doing things more often across a larger area? Because I mean, like you can't have a significant professional staff dedicated only to those acquisitions only for Dakota County, because it just doesn't happen that often. But some of these things that are statewide, tying in, maybe a sort of a department under them or something might make sense. I think there's a lot to explore with that we're not going to figure out tonight. But yeah.
I will just say that we do have third-party acquisition language in our grant admin guide. It's something we do encourage when funding's short.
I'll have to go read that section. Anything else? Anything else from you? All right. I think that was pretty good. Thank you. So that then will bring us on to our reports for the day. Sue, I should plan on a couple of phone calls with you maybe as a result of our conversations yesterday. I want to check in a bit about kind of thoughts of how we relate to like budgeting and admin type processes at the council level. Because there's things that are like, we want to talk about what to do with various money and how, but some of that ties into, well, the council actually decides what the budget for that money is, so what does that relationship look like? And I don't grasp that yet, so I should check in with you about that. That's all I had. Other commissioners? Sue?
I had the delightful privilege of going to the Three Rivers State of the Parks event a week ago this morning. It was a gorgeous Thursday. It was out at the Highland Park Chalet. I took the scenic route because I have a Surrey that I think starts with Bloody Mary. It's fairly early in the morning and she had me all over the place, but I got to see a lot of the park. But it was a great event and a real celebration of what that park agency does. The program was excellent, but the other part of it that just dazzled me was it not only was it a presentation, but it was an expo. And how many entities from within Three Rivers had exhibits there? Jonathan, do you know?
At least a dozen.
Yeah, at least a dozen, and it was just a delightful experience. So if you know of events like that going on with the regional parks in your districts, let me know, because I love going out to those things, and I have a nephew-in-law who's always looking for fun places to take his kids, and he's also a crazy bicyclist, so he's always looking for trails too, so keep me posted. It was a great event.
Okay, thank you.
And I should say that unfortunately, Jonathan and his colleague Luke weren't able to be there, but they got accolades from the president of the park agency, so.
Very good. Staff.
As a segue from Sue's update, I will say that Jonathan and I were at Lake Waconia Regional Park visiting the brand new Paradise Commons. It's the new visitor center that sort of took the place of the Waconia Ballroom, largest wooden dance floor in Minnesota. No more. That was sort of, I know, sorry. But
By the way, land acquired with reimbursement consideration?
It was, it is stunning. I recommend everyone get out there. It's a B3 building, which I don't know exactly what that means other than it's like LEED certified. It's just phenomenal with solar, passive solar, what's that, geothermal, you name it, they've got it. Bird-friendly windows. It was a beautiful facility. So and it was a good Parks and Trails Legacy Advisory Committee discussion. The only thing else I'll say is okay, here we are. It's May 2nd. We are in the last weeks of the legislative session. Lot of intrigue and excitement, but it will end. I think it's the 20th or so. And currently, the bonding bill has $8 million set aside for the regional parks and trail system, which is pretty good. And we would match that with $5.5 or so million. So that's exciting. Will it stay in? I don't know. I think it's going to be a race to the finish. There are other bills also moving forward, including a legacy bill that allocates. There was an additional $10 million in total revenue for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund. So I think the Metro system will get about a $3 million bump for the fiscal year 2025. Too much detail, but it's the good news is that the session is moving forward. We're still under consideration. Stay tuned. We'll give you a little legislative report at our June meeting. Legislature will hopefully be long over. I mean, it has to be over.
Do you know whether anything came out of committee regarding updates to the open meeting law regarding us?
No.
Okay. Ask about that again next year.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. That's all I have, Chair.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That was a good meeting. We are ready to adjourn. See you next month. Probably read this and email staff with things between now and then.